This is the story of Tim Clark, a casual duty manager and lifeguard who's had first-hand experience in dealing with a major emergency. It was on one of Tim's last shifts when he was working with his operations manager trying to fix a broken shower head. He heard those three fateful words over the radio that no lifeguard or duty manager ever wants to hear. Major, major, major. We were lucky enough to sit down with Tim and get some insight onto how he handled that major emergency.
I probably started as a lifeguard in 2006 as a summer job, just as I finished high school. I continued on and filled in some different areas, but mostly I lifeguarded and duty managed for 10 years up until the end of last year. One of the most exciting parts of the job for me was just to meet the community. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I really made some great connections and it just opened a lot of enjoyment for me in the job. Well, I was involved in a serious incident at the end of last year. It's actually 1 year to today. So it was actually my last shift in my last 90 minutes when I got a call of major, and unfortunately I saw one of the lifeguards pulling an unconscious elderly male out of the pool. Just leading up to it, it was just it was another day. I was chasing up a spare part to replace the shower head. I was standing next to my operations manager at the time when I heard major, major, major on the radio. I looked at him, I said, "Did you hear that?" As if it was some message from outer space. It just didn't make sense. But in that half a second you realised that it wasn't a joke, it was serious. Yeah, the funny thing about the centre is I was upstairs. As I confirmed what I heard as a major, I didn't hear any other information. I started walking and I purposefully walked. As I walked past reception, again I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was serious. Reception, call an ambulance and we'll let you know as we get down there. As I'm walking down from the top deck, I could see a lifeguard bringing the unconscious male over a lane rope, and then I knew we were really in a serious situation. I was walking towards casualty. I went past the first aid room, so I grabbed the oxygen and I met the second lifeguard who also grabbed the defib. As we were walking towards the patron, I was so thankful that I had the presence of mind. I knew you can't put a defib on a wet patron, so I instructed one of the swim teachers to grab some towels and meet us over there as well. Once I got to the patron, the lifeguard had already started CPR and was being assisted by another patron in the water. To explain how I felt leading up to getting within that, getting towards the patron, I felt like I was floating, Paul. I didn't feel like my legs were moving, I was just floating. All this adrenaline was pumping through. I'm so glad that I was walking, because it's one thing the paramedics are taught, is just to walk towards an emergency situation. So even though I've never been presented with an unconscious male patron in the water before, I'm glad that I had this solid training underneath me to give me the confidence and also an ability to look at the whole picture. Emotions, obviously your heartbeat is just going through 3,000 miles an hour. You're a combination of just adrenaline and you're trying to make sure you're doing the right thing before you get to the patron. Again, I'm thankful that I just had some great presence of mind from all my training. The first thing I said to the lifeguard, who had now started compressions and doing the breaths, was, "You're doing a great job." So immediately I wanted to build that rapport and the confidence in the lifeguard. He was doing a great job. While he was doing the compressions, I set up the oxygen. Once I was ready, I told him, "You keep doing the oxygen and I'll do the breaths." What I saw from the patron, he was an elderly male, probably 60 years old. He was overweight, probably categorized as obese. He had a beard, short hair. One thing I also noticed after he's been pulled out from the pool was that he had flippers on. and that gave me an indication that he was a moderate swimmer. He wouldn't be classified as a weak swimmer. And he was also swimming in the fast lane, so he did have some ability and confidence to be swimming unassisted in the water.
And his physical state at that time when you got to him?
When I got to him, he was unconscious, not breathing. One thing, Paul, that was most confronting was that a divide between training and real life. With training, we have a mannequin which is rigid. You click, you press down a third of the way and it clicks, so you know that you've done the right thing. When you're doing the breaths, the head will stay in position. It's a silicon chest and face. One thing that I found most confronting was that I had to place my hands on this guy's face and stubble, and it just wasn't something that I was prepared for in training. It wasn't even something that was mentioned. Furthermore, that the guy had flippers on. We had to take his flippers off. As he was unconscious, he lost an ability to control his bodily fluids, so you had to also manage the biohazards in that respect as well. And then finally, his eyelids were open, so I saw directly into his eyes, and it's just all those little things that can affect you emotionally at the time, and I just wasn't prepared for that during the training.
He's got oxygen on, we've taken over breaths, and then what next?
Once we've got the oxygen on, we started rotating, so I went across and started doing some compressions. And we were quite rigid in our approach. I did 3 lots of 30 compressions, and then we rotated around. Because we were in the direct sun, as I mentioned earlier, it was quite hot. So in the humid environment of the pool deck, it was just sapping your energy so quickly. We had to move him because he was too close to the pool deck before we put a defib on. I had his head. Again, it's just not something you're really prepared for moving a patron who was obese, but also as the body's 70% water, it's just a completely fluid body, and arms and limbs were all things you had to manage. But I had to take his head. I held his head in my hands as I moved him before we could put the defib on. I think it's respect to the training that was done, because everyone knew their roles. The roles were constantly changing, from doing breaths to compressions to monitoring the oxygen to the defib. Everyone knew what their role was, and even though I had 10 years of experience, I was working with a lifeguard with less than 6 months experience. It's just really a credit to the story that it could happen to anyone as well. The reality is, Paul, this guy was real. He was a real person. He had a name. He's got family. It was just a month before Christmas as well, so he probably had a Christmas to attend. But I knew, breathing into him, I could see into his eyes, that it wasn't something I'd experienced before. My actions were vital for this guy to survive. But I knew, looking into his eyes, it's not something I've ever seen before in someone's eyes, but I knew that we really had to work as a team to get the best outcome. So we've been doing CPR for several minutes, and the paramedics start arriving with their equipment. I wanted, as soon as we got the permission, I wanted to take the lifeguards, because they were quite young. They were 18, 19 years old at that time. I didn't want them to experience anything further, and the devastating reality that was becoming apparent to leave once we got that permission. The paramedics arrived, and they gave him several adrenaline shots. They replaced the defib. Their defib, you're actually able to see his heartbeat, and unfortunately you could see that the only beat was the compression. I saw the paramedics give him several adrenaline shots, and this is all information to me. I know I don't live under a rock. The more adrenaline shots, and there's no heartbeat seen on this T-bib, that this wasn't going to go our way. The paramedics were obliged to continue CPR for 30 minutes. Maybe 20 minutes in, they turned to me and said, "We're obligated to continue CPR for 30 minutes. We've done everything we can. Unfortunately, this man has passed away, but we will continue CPR for 10 minutes and then pronounce."
Obviously, after the event, there's quite a significant amount of things that need to be done around paperwork and talking about it. You go home, who do you talk to, who do you debrief with, and maybe take us through the next stage?
Straight away, once the paramedics had declared this man, the paperwork started. Mountains of paperwork, but you really wanted to make sure that what I was writing was accurate. A few people just caught me as I was writing, just wanted to know what happened. I didn't want to discuss it with them because I didn't want the opportunity for misinformation to get disseminated, especially after such a traumatic event affecting so many people. I've done my paperwork and I got the permission to go home. I was actually supposed to ride my bike that day, but I called my fiance at the time to come pick me up. She knew that it was serious. As I left, I could see that the car park was empty and just full of ambulance officers. And I have friends who are paramedics, so I immediately called them, asked them what their opinions were, and if I've done anything that could have been done differently. Thankfully, they were very supportive, and although they weren't there, they could give me a strong indication that unfortunately this man just pushed off the wall, had a heart attack, and there was nothing that we could have done. It was just his time, unfortunately. The following day, not 24 hours later, I was invited to attend a meeting with everyone, and that was also attended by an EAP psychologist. The center manager at my other workplace called me and just offered his support and opened his door if I wanted to come in. I took that up straight away. Immediately, once I got there, I think the emotions really caught up with me and I was just a bit of a mess in that office. I'll admit, yeah, I cried, and I cried a few more days after that as well, just because you're trying to understand what just happened, and your body's still very much a cocktail of all sorts of hormones, and you're just trying to make sense of it all.
So now, Tim, if you could, I guess, give us, it's, as you said, it's 12 months almost to the day. How are you? How are you feeling with it? What's been happening?
Yeah, Paul, again, 12 months to the day, just by coincidence, this interview's taking place. I went back for a few more shifts at the site. Again, I think it was important for me. I didn't want to, but it was important for me to just have some closure, and the EAP psychologist really suggested that I go back to take ownership of what happened there as well. I worked in the industry for a few more years. I knew early on in my career that this was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. And it was just unfortunate that really happened in the last 2 months of my time in the industry. Since then, I got married. I finished my Masters in Teaching, and I'm now working at 2 different primary schools. I'm so thankful for my time in the sport and rec industry and YMCA. I'm also thankful that there was no coroner inquest. Immediately after, the police were there acting on behalf of the coroner to get information. And because I had so many exciting things at the end of the year, including getting married and the honeymoon, I'm thankful that I didn't get to spend the next few years in and out of courtrooms justifying each action I took that day. Well, the reality is, I knew it was going to happen. So I always took responsibility of my own qualifications. I didn't let someone tell me that they were about to expire. I was very proactive in that regard. I also made sure that I attended all the staff meetings and associated training as well. All these factors gave me the confidence to know that I did everything right that day.